The Galante mansion stood like a cathedral of shadows on the hillside, its iron gates black against the October twilight. Salvatore Russo had opened those gates every morning for 42 years, his arthritic fingers working the ancient lock with the precision of ritual. At 73, his back was bent from decades of service, his silver hair thinned to wisps, but his dark eyes remained sharp beneath heavy lids. He wore the same black suit he had worn for 4 decades, meticulously pressed, the fabric shining at the elbows from years of bowing. Beside him in the servants' quarters, his wife Filomena folded linens with hands that trembled slightly but never faltered. At 70, she remained small and compact, her face a map of fine wrinkles earned through silence. Her black dress, simple and starched, whispered as she moved through the mansion's endless corridors. Together, they were the ghosts of the Galante household, present but invisible, necessary but forgotten. The mansion itself was a monument to Don Vittorio Galante's power. 3 stories of dark stone and darker windows, rooms that smelled of cigars and old money, hallways lined with portraits of dead men whose eyes seemed to follow movement. The dining room could seat 30 beneath a chandelier of Venetian crystal. The library held first editions that no one read. The wine cellar descended 3 levels into the earth, its bottles worth more than most men's lives. Salvatore and Filomena knew every inch of it. They knew which floorboards creaked, which doors stuck in humidity, which windows the Don preferred open and which must always remain locked. They knew the hidden passage behind the library that led to the Don's private study. They knew the iron door in the basement that led to the old speakeasy tunnels from Prohibition days, tunnels the Don still used when discretion required it. Most importantly, they knew how to be invisible. "The Don will have guests tonight," Filomena said quietly as she arranged white roses in a crystal vase. Her voice was soft, worn smooth by years of speaking only when necessary. "Caterina arrives at 8. Salvatore nodded, polishing silver that already gleamed. Caterina Rossi. The mistress. She had appeared 2 years ago, 28 years old, beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Dark hair that fell in waves to her waist, green eyes that calculated every angle, lips painted the color of fresh blood. The Don, at 65, had been instantly captivated. Donna Lucia, the Don's wife of 40 years, now lived in the East Wing, her rooms overlooking the garden she no longer tended. She was 58, grey-haired and dignified, her beauty eroded by decades of looking the other way. She took her meals alone. She spoke to no one. She had become a ghost in her own home, displaced by younger flesh and older appetites. The household had adjusted to this new reality with the efficiency of those who survive by not questioning. The capos who visited the mansion nodded respectfully to Donna Lucia when they encountered her, then spent their evenings laughing with Caterina in the Don's presence. The soldiers who guarded the gates knew which cars to announce and which to admit without ceremony. The other servants, few as they were, understood that some rooms were now Caterina's domain. Only Salvatore and Filomena remained constant, serving both women with equal discretion, loyal to the house itself rather than its occupants. At 7:30, Salvatore began preparing the dining room. He set 2 places at one end of the long mahogany table, intimate despite the room's grandeur, crystal wine glasses, silver cutlery that had belonged to the Don's grandfather, plates of fine porcelain, hand-painted with gold leaf, white linen napkins folded into perfect triangles. Filomena brought the wine from the cellar, a 1947 Barolo that the Don favored for private dinners. She decanted it with steady hands, letting it breathe in a crystal vessel that caught the candlelight like captured fire. The Don descended the stairs at 7:50, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Vittorio Galante was a large man, 6 feet tall and broad-shouldered, his bulk carefully maintained between muscle and weight. His hair, still thick at 65, was swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Deep-set eyes, a prominent nose broken twice in his youth, a mouth that smiled rarely and meant it never. He wore a charcoal suit tailored in Milan, a white shirt, a burgundy tie. 3 gold rings adorned his fingers, each one a symbol of power earned in blood. "Salvatore," he said, his voice like gravel rolling downhill. "Don Galante." Salvatore bowed slightly, his eyes lowered. "Everything is prepared." "Yes, Don Galante, the wine is breathing. The kitchen has prepared the osso buco as you requested." The Don nodded, walking to the window that overlooked the circular driveway. His hands clasped behind his back, he stood in the posture of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Outside, the gates opened. A red Ferrari Spider purred up the drive, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Caterina Rossi emerged from the car like a vision designed to stop hearts. She wore a black dress that clung to every curve, slit high on one thigh, emerald earrings that matched her eyes. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the elegant line of her neck. She moved with the confidence of a woman who knew her power, her heels clicking on the stone steps. Salvatore opened the door before she could knock. "Good evening, Signorina Rossi." She swept past him without acknowledgement, her perfume heavy and expensive. The Don turned from the window, and his granite face softened fractionally. He crossed the foyer in 3 strides, taking her hand and kissing it with a courtliness that seemed borrowed from another century. "Caterina, you look magnificent." "Vittorio," her voice was honey and smoke, "you spoil me with these private dinners. A man should worship beauty when he finds it." They moved into the dining room, and Salvatore closed the heavy doors, leaving them to their intimacy. He retreated to the butler's pantry, a narrow room between the kitchen and dining room, connected by a serving door that allowed him to appear and disappear as needed. Filomena was already there, arranging appetizers on a silver tray, bruschetta with tomatoes from the garden, prosciutto sliced paper-thin, olives cured in herbs and oil. She moved with the efficiency of long practice, her movements economical and precise. "How does she seem?" Filomena asked quietly. "Pleased with herself," Salvatore replied. "More than usual." They had learned to read the mansion's occupants the way sailors read weather. A slight change in tone, a particular expression, the way someone held their wineglass, all of it meant something to those who knew how to look. Salvatore carried the appetizers into the dining room. The Don and Caterina sat close together at the table's end, their heads bent in conversation that stopped when he entered. He placed the tray between them, refilled their wineglasses, and withdrew without a word. Back in the pantry, he listened. It was not spying. Servants did not spy. They simply heard what was said in their presence, and their presence was everywhere and nowhere. The Don's voice, rough with satisfaction. "The Bonanno family thinks they can expand into our territory. They will learn otherwise." Caterina's laugh, bright and cutting. "Men and their territories, like dogs marking trees. You mock what you don't understand, Cara. These territories were bought with blood. They will be kept with blood." "I understand more than you think, Vittorio. I understand that power is not just held, it must be displayed. Your birthday celebration next month, for instance. It should be legendary, something that reminds everyone who rules this city." A pause, the sound of wine being sipped. "You have ideas?" the Don asked. "Many ideas. A feast like the old days. Invite all the families. Show them your strength, your prosperity. Let them see that you are not weakening with age." The Don's voice hardened slightly. "I am not weak. Of course not, amore. But perception matters. There are whispers. You know there are always whispers." Salvatore glanced at Filomena, who had gone very still. Whispers were dangerous things in the Don's world. Men died for whispers. "What whispers?" The Don's tone was ice. "Nothing of substance. Just some of the younger capos wondering if you are distracted, if your attention is divided between business and other pleasures." A longer pause. When the Don spoke again, his voice was measured, controlled. "My attention is divided when I choose to divide it. My business has never been stronger. Profits are up. Our operations expand. The families that once challenged us now bow. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. When they see the celebration you describe, they will remember why they fear me." "Good," Caterina purred. "Then let me help you plan it. A feast to remember. The finest food, the best wine, entertainment, music. We'll fill this mansion with power. Every Don from Boston to Miami will attend and leave, knowing that Vittorio Galante is still the king." Salvatore served the main course, osso buco with saffron risotto, the veal braised until it fell from the bone. The scent filled the room, rich and savory. He poured more wine, the Barolo flowing like dark rubies. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Caterina spoke of a gallery opening she had attended, a new designer whose work she admired. The Don listened with the attention of a man who found everything about her fascinating. They laughed together, their voices mingling with the clink of silver on porcelain. But Salvatore's trained ear caught something beneath the surface. A tension in Caterina's laughter, a calculation in the way she steered conversation. He had served powerful men his entire life, had watched them scheme and plot in rooms they thought were private. He recognized the signs. After the main course, he served espresso and almond biscotti. The Don lit a cigar, the smoke rising in lazy spirals toward the frescoed ceiling. Caterina declined coffee, instead sipping grappa from a small glass. "You should rest soon," she said, running one finger along the rim of her glass. "You work too hard, Vittorio. A man of your position should delegate more." "I delegate what can be delegated. Some things require my personal attention. Even so, you are not as young as you once were. You must think of your health, your legacy." The Don studied her through a cloud of cigar smoke. "My legacy is secure. My business is strong. My family name will endure long after I am gone." "And Donna Lucia, what of her?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Salvatore, clearing dessert plates, kept his face carefully neutral. "Lucia has her place," the Don said coldly. "She is my wife. That has not changed. But she is not happy. I see her sometimes walking alone in the garden. She looks like a ghost. Lucia understands the realities of our world. She has always understood." Caterina leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that Salvatore, standing by the sideboard, had to strain to hear. "But does she accept them, Vittorio? A woman scorned is a dangerous thing, even a quiet woman, especially a quiet woman." The Don's hand came down on the table, not quite a slam, but hard enough to rattle the glasses. "Lucia is no threat. She has been with me for 40 years. She knows the cost of disloyalty." "Of course," Caterina said smoothly, retreating. "Forgive me. I worry only for your safety. You have so many enemies. I would hate for one to come from within your own house." The evening wound down shortly after. The Don and Caterina moved to the library, where Salvatore served them brandy and left them alone. He returned to the butler's pantry, where Filomena was washing the wine glasses by hand, handling each one as if it were made of breath. "She plants doubts," Filomena said quietly. "Yes," Salvatore agreed. "About Donna Lucia?" "Yes." They worked in silence for a while, clearing the dining room, restoring it to its usual pristine state. The mansion settled around them, its old bones creaking, its shadows deepening. At 11, Caterina left, her Ferrari growling down the driveway. The Don retired to his bedroom on the second floor. The guards changed shifts, fresh soldiers taking positions at the gates and doors. Salvatore and Filomena climbed the narrow servants' stairs to their small apartment on the third floor. 2 rooms tucked under the eaves, sparsely furnished, clean and quiet. They had lived here for 42 years, raising no children, accumulating few possessions, existing in the margins of other people's lives. Filomena sat on the edge of their narrow bed, removing her shoes with a soft sigh. Salvatore stood at the window, looking down at the dark gardens, the high walls, the iron gates that had enclosed his life for so long. "She is planning something," Filomena said. "Yes." "Something bad?" "Yes." "Should we warn the Don?" Salvatore turned from the window. His wife's face was lined with worry, her hands clasped in her lap. They had survived this long by being invisible, by serving without questioning, by knowing secrets and keeping them buried. "We are servants," he said gently. "The Don does not want our warnings. He wants his meals served on time and his house kept clean. But if something happens, then we will serve whoever survives." It was the truth of their existence, harsh and simple. They were furniture that breathed, fixtures that aged, part of the mansion's foundation. They had watched men rise and fall, alliances form and shatter, blood spill and be mopped up. They had endured because they made themselves essential and invisible in equal measure. Filomena nodded slowly, accepting what she had always known. She crossed herself, a habit from childhood that had survived decades of witnessing sins the church never imagined. They prepared for bed in silence, their routines worn smooth by repetition. Salvatore checked that their door was locked, though no lock in this mansion could keep out determined intruders. Filomena said her prayers, whispering words of protection and mercy into the darkness. Outside, the October wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of dying leaves and distant rain. The mansion stood solid and dark, keeping its secrets, protecting its Don, housing its ghosts. In her rooms in the East Wing, Donna Lucia sat by her window, looking out at nothing, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. She had not slept through the night in 2 years. In his bedroom, Don Vittorio Galante lay on his back, hands clasped across his chest, breathing the deep, even breaths of a man whose conscience never troubled his rest. And somewhere in the city below, Caterina Rossi drove her red Ferrari through streets that gleamed with rain, her green eyes reflecting the passing lights, her mind turning over plans that would reshape the Galante empire. In their small apartment, Salvatore and Filomena lay side by side in the darkness. Two old people who had learned that survival meant silence, that loyalty meant blindness, that service meant surrender. They did not yet know that in 2 weeks they would hear words that would shatter that silence forever. They did not yet know that their invisibility, their greatest protection, would become their greatest danger. They slept the sleep of servants, light and ready, listening even in dreams for the bell that might summon them to duties that never ended, in a house where shadows had names and secrets had teeth. The night deepened. The wind grew stronger. In the wine cellar, bottles worth fortunes rested in their racks, waiting to be opened, waiting to spill their dark contents. And in the hidden passages that only Salvatore and Filomena knew, passages built during Prohibition and never sealed, dust settled on stone floors that had not felt footsteps in decades. Soon, those passages would wake. Soon, those stones would remember the sound of hurried feet fleeing through darkness. But not yet, not yet. For now the mansion slept, and its servants slept with it, and the shadows kept their secrets for one more night. The preparations for Don Vittorio Galante's 65th birthday celebration consumed the mansion for 2 weeks. Caterina Rossi took charge with the enthusiasm of a general planning a campaign, her instructions flowing like edicts. The finest caterers from Little Italy were hired, then fired when their work did not meet her standards, then hired again at twice their original price. Florists arrived with truckloads of blood-red roses and white lilies. Musicians were auditioned, contracts negotiated, security protocols reviewed. Salvatore and Filomena found themselves working 16-hour days, coordinating deliveries, supervising staff, ensuring that every detail matched Caterina's vision. The Don himself seemed content to let her orchestrate the event, appearing only to approve major decisions with a nod or a grunt of satisfaction. Donna Lucia remained in the East Wing, her presence in the household growing fainter by the day. Salvatore brought her meals on a silver tray, setting them on the small table by her window. She ate little, spoke less, her eyes distant as if she were seeing something far beyond the garden walls. "How is she?" Filomena asked one evening as they prepared the dining room for another planning session between the Don and Caterina. "Fading," Salvatore said quietly, "like a photograph left in the sun." The guest list grew to 70 names. Every major family from the eastern seaboard would be represented. The Bonanno clan from New York, despite their territorial disputes with the Galantes, the Trafficante family from Tampa, the Patriarca organization from Boston, smaller families, affiliate crews, even independent operators who owed the Don favors or feared his displeasure. Security became an obsession. Tommy the Bull Marconi, the Don's chief enforcer, walked the grounds daily, his massive frame moving with surprising grace as he checked sightlines and escape routes. Additional soldiers were hired, vetted, and positioned. Metal detectors were installed at the gates, disguised as decorative columns. "We are inviting wolves into the house," Tommy said to the Don during one security briefing that Salvatore overheard while serving coffee. "Even with precautions, it is a risk." "Life is a risk," the Don replied, "but this feast will remind them why they fear the name Galante. Let them come, let them see, let them remember." 3 days before the celebration, the gifts began arriving. Expensive wines, rare cigars, antique firearms mounted in glass cases. A capo from Philadelphia sent a racing horse. A crew from Atlantic City delivered a case of 1926 cognac, each bottle worth more than a car. The gifts were displayed in the main hall, a testament to the Don's influence and reach. Caterina supervised their arrangement with meticulous attention, ensuring each was positioned to maximum effect. She wore designer suits during these preparations, her hair pulled back, her manner brisk and businesslike, but Salvatore noticed how her eyes lingered on certain gifts, calculating their value, assessing what they represented in terms of allegiance and obligation. On the evening of October 28th, 2 days before the feast, Salvatore was in the wine cellar selecting bottles for the celebration when he heard footsteps on the stone stairs. He turned to see Caterina descending, her heels clicking on each step. She had never come to the cellar before. It was not her domain, and she had shown no interest in the wines beyond their cost. "Signorina Rossi," he said, bowing slightly. "Salvatore." She moved among the racks, trailing one finger along the dusty bottles. "The Don speaks highly of your knowledge of wines. He says you have been custodian of this cellar for 40 years. 42 years, Signorina. Such dedication, such loyalty. She selected a bottle at random, examining its label without really seeing it. You must have seen much in that time, heard much, learned much about the family's business. Salvatore kept his face carefully neutral. I serve the Don. I keep his house. I know wine and silver and how to open doors quietly. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Of course, a good servant sees nothing, hears nothing, remembers nothing. Is that not the saying? I have heard it said, Signorina. She replaced the bottle and moved closer. Salvatore could smell her perfume, could see the calculation in her green eyes. And Donna Lucia? You serve her as well? I serve the household, Signorina, but you bring her meals. You attend to her needs. You must speak with her sometimes. Only as duty requires, Signorina. And what does she say in these moments of duty? Does she speak of the Don? Does she speak of me? It was a trap, delicately baited. Whatever he said could be twisted, used, turned into ammunition. Salvatore had survived 4 decades by recognizing such traps and stepping carefully around them. Donna Lucia speaks very little, Signorina. She is a quiet woman. She asks for nothing. She complains of nothing. She simply exists. Caterina studied him for a long moment, searching for deception or hidden meaning. Finding none, or appearing to find none, she nodded slowly. You are a wise man, Salvatore. Wise men survive in dangerous houses. She moved toward the stairs, then paused. The Don trusts you. He trusts your discretion. I hope that trust is well placed. The Don's trust is the foundation of my life, Signorina. She ascended the stairs without another word, leaving Salvatore alone among the bottles and the shadows. He waited several minutes before allowing himself to breathe fully. His hands, he noticed, were trembling slightly. That night, he told Filomena about the encounter as they prepared for bed. She was testing you, Filomena said, brushing out her thin grey hair, seeing if you could be turned, or if you are loyal to Donna Lucia. I am loyal to survival, Salvatore replied, which means I am loyal to whoever holds power. And right now, power is shifting. From the Don to Caterina? No, Caterina has no real power of her own, but she has the Don's ear, and in our world, that is nearly the same thing. Filomena set down her brush. I have a bad feeling about this feast. Too many people, too many opportunities for things to go wrong, and Caterina is planning something. I can feel it in my bones. Salvatore had the same feeling, a cold unease that had been growing for days. But what could they do? They were servants. Their feelings were irrelevant to the great machinery of power that ground forward regardless of who stood in its path. The day before the feast, the mansion transformed into something between a palace and a fortress. White silk draped the walls of the main hall. The chandelier was lowered and cleaned until every crystal blazed. The dining room table was extended to its full 30-foot length, set with china that had belonged to the Don's grandmother, brought from Sicily in 1903. In the kitchen, a staff of 12 worked under the supervision of Chef Antonio, a volatile artist who screamed at his assistants in Italian and tasted everything with the concentration of a chemist. The menu was elaborate. Antipasto, pasta al forno, roasted lamb, sea bass in salt crust, endless sides and salads, and a birthday cake that required its own refrigerated truck. Salvatore and Filomena moved through this chaos like currents in a river, guiding without seeming to guide, correcting without being noticed, ensuring that every element flowed toward the shared goal of perfection. On the morning of October 30th, the day of the feast, Salvatore rose at 4 a.m. He made coffee in the small kitchen of their apartment, the bitter scent cutting through his fatigue. From their window, he could see the first delivery trucks arriving at the gates, guards checking manifests, waving them through. Filomena joined him, already dressed in her black uniform. They drank their coffee in silence, an old married couple with no need for words. But Salvatore noticed how his wife's hands shook slightly as she raised her cup, how her eyes kept darting to the window, as if expecting something terrible to emerge from the pre-dawn darkness. By noon, the preparations were complete. The mansion gleamed. The food was staged in warming ovens. The musicians tuned their instruments in the ballroom. The guards took their positions, weapons hidden but accessible. The stage was set. Don Vittorio Galante descended the stairs at 1 p.m., dressed in a black tuxedo that must have cost $5,000. His hair was freshly cut, his face closely shaved, his rings polished to a high shine. At 65, he looked like a king, preparing to receive tribute. Caterina appeared moments later, wearing a gown of deep crimson silk that clung to her body like water. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair cascaded in perfect waves down her bare back. She took the Don's arm, and together they looked like Renaissance nobility, power, and beauty united. "Everything is ready?" the Don asked Salvatore. "Yes, Don Galante. Everything is as you wished." "Good. This night will be remembered. Let them see what the Galante family can do. Let them see that age has not weakened me, that my hand is still firm, my reach still long." The guests began arriving at 3 p.m. They came in limousines and sports cars, in groups of 2 or 3, each arrival carefully staged and timed. Salvatore stood at the door, greeting each one with a bow, taking coats and hats, directing them into the main hall where servers circulated with champagne and canapes. He recognized most of them by reputation, if not by sight. Don Angelo Bonanno, small and wiry, his eyes like chips of black ice. Frankie, 3 Fingers DeLuca from Boston, missing the digits on his left hand from a punishment decades ago. Maria Traficante, the rare woman Don, running her family's operations with ruthless efficiency after her husband's death. Capos and consiglieres, underbosses and soldiers, all dressed in their finest, all wearing smiles that disguised fangs. The atmosphere was cordial but tense, like a gathering of ancient predators around a watering hole. Old grudges were temporarily set aside, territorial disputes acknowledged but not discussed, the violence that underscored their world carefully veiled beneath courtesy and champagne. Donna Lucia did not appear. No one asked for her. Her absence was noted but not commented upon, one more sign of how thoroughly she had been erased from the Don's public life. At 6 p.m., dinner was announced. The guests filed into the dining room, taking seats according to a carefully planned hierarchy. The Don sat at the head of the table, Caterina at his right hand. The seating arrangement was a map of power, with the most influential families closest to the Don, the lesser crews farther away. Salvatore supervised the serving with military precision. The antipasto appeared first. Prosciutto, salami, marinated vegetables, fresh mozzarella. Wine flowed, a different vintage for each course. Conversations grew louder as alcohol loosened tongues, laughter echoing off the frescoed ceiling. Between the pasta and the main course, Don Vittorio stood, tapping his wineglass with a knife until silence fell. "My friends," he said, his rough voice carrying to every corner of the room, "you honor me with your presence. For 65 years, I have walked this earth. For 40 of those years, I have led my family with strength and wisdom. I have made enemies and buried them. I have made fortunes and shared them with those who deserve to share. I have built an empire that will endure long after I am gone." Murmurs of approval, raised glasses, nodding heads. "Some of you have tested me. Some of you have challenged my authority. All of you have learned that the Galante family does not bend, does not break, does not forget. But tonight is not about threats. Tonight is about celebration, about unity, about showing that together we are stronger than any force that opposes us." He raised his glass. "To family, to loyalty, to the old ways and the new prophets, salute! Salute!" The room chorused, glasses raised, wine flowing like blood. The Don sat, and Caterina leaned close to whisper something in his ear. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his granite features into something almost warm, and kissed her hand. Salvatore served the lamb, roasted with rosemary and garlic, the meat so tender it fell from the bone. The sea bass followed, its salt crust cracked open at the table to reveal perfectly steamed flesh. More wine, more courses, a feast that seemed endless. He was carrying a tray of fresh glasses from the kitchen when he passed the small library off the main hall. The door was slightly ajar, and through it he heard voices, Caterina and another woman, speaking in low, urgent tones. He should have continued past. A good servant does not eavesdrop. But something in the tone stopped him, some quality of conspiracy that triggered 4 decades of survival instinct. He set down the tray silently and moved closer to the door. "Must be tonight," the other woman was saying. Her voice was unfamiliar, younger, nervous. "After the toast, after the cake, when everyone is distracted." "I know the plan," Caterina replied, her voice sharp. "I have gone over it 100 times. The poison is tasteless, odorless. It will seem like a heart attack." The old fool's heart finally giving out from too much rich food and excitement. Salvatore's blood turned to ice water. "But so many witnesses," the younger woman said. "So many people. That is the beauty of it. With so many people, chaos will follow. and in that chaos we will point fingers. At Donna Lucia specifically, the betrayed wife who finally snapped, who poisoned her husband rather than let him humiliate her further. The evidence is already planted in her rooms. The police will find it. The family will demand her blood, and I will be the grieving mistress devastated by the loss of my love, ready to help his successor in any way I can. And the successor will be Angelo Trafficante, who has already agreed to the arrangement. He will take over the Galante territories. I will receive my compensation, and the old order will finally change. Vittorio has held power too long. He has grown complacent, predictable. The younger generation needs new leadership. What about the servants, the old couple who run the house? A pause. Salvatore pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. They will be dealt with, Caterina said coldly. They see too much, hear too much. After tonight, after the police have finished their investigation, there will be an unfortunate accident, a gas leak perhaps, or a fire in the servants' quarters. These old houses, they burn so easily. The younger woman gasped. You would kill them? They are harmless. No one is harmless who knows secrets. This is not a game, Sophia. This is survival. This is power. Either you are with me, or you are a liability. Which is it? I am with you. Of course, I'm sorry. Good. Now return to the party, act natural, smile, laugh, drink, and when the moment comes, be ready to play your part. Footsteps approached the door. Salvatore moved with surprising speed for a man of 73, grabbing his tray and hurrying down the hallway. He ducked into the butler's pantry just as the library door opened fully. Through the serving window, he saw Caterina emerge, followed by a young woman he did not recognize. Perhaps 30, pretty in a common way, her eyes wide with fear or excitement or both. They separated, Caterina heading back toward the dining room, Sophia slipping out a side door toward the gardens. Salvatore stood in the pantry, his heart hammering, his mind racing. Filomena was there, arranging dessert plates, and she looked up at him with concern. Salvatore, what is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost. He pulled her away from the door, into the corner where they could not be seen or easily heard. We must leave, he whispered urgently. Tonight, now, as soon as possible. Leave? What are you talking about? The feast is only half over. Caterina is going to poison the Don. Tonight, during the celebration, and then she is going to blame Donna Lucia and have us killed to eliminate witnesses. Filomena's face went white. You are certain? I heard her, just now, planning with another woman, every detail. Then we must warn the Don, and say what? That we were eavesdropping on his mistress? That we heard her plotting murder? Filomena, think, if we go to him, he might not believe us. Or worse, he might think we are trying to turn him against Caterina. Men in love are not rational, and even if he believes us, even if he stops the plot, we become targets. Caterina will know we betrayed her. She has allies, resources. We would never be safe. But if we say nothing, he dies, and Donna Lucia will be blamed, and we will die in a fire or accident. Salvatore gripped his wife's hands. If we stay, we die. If we speak, we die. Our only chance is to run, right now, while everyone is distracted with the feast. Run where? We have no money, no family, nowhere to go. We have something better than money. We have knowledge. 42 years of knowledge. Names, dates, secrets. I have been keeping a book, Filomena. A record of everything I have seen and heard in this house. Insurance in case it was ever needed. It is hidden in our rooms. We take it with us. It is our leverage, our protection. Filomena's eyes filled with tears. This house has been our whole life, and our lives are worth nothing if we are dead. Please, Filomena, trust me. We must go now before the poison is used, before we are missed. Outside the pantry, they could hear the party continuing. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. The feast was reaching its height. Soon would come the birthday cake, the final toasts, the moment when Caterina would make her move. Filomena closed her eyes, crossed herself, and nodded. What do we do? Salvatore's mind worked quickly, assembling the pieces of a desperate plan. We go to our rooms. We pack only what we can carry. Clothes, your jewelry, my book of secrets. There is money in the wall safe, my savings from 40 years. Not much, but enough to get us somewhere safe. Then we use the old passage. The Prohibition Tunnel. Yes, it runs from the basement to the old wine warehouse 3 blocks away. No one uses it anymore. No one even remembers it exists except us. We can be out of the estate and into the city before anyone notices we are gone. But they will search for us. The Don's men, They will hunt us. Not if they are busy dealing with the aftermath of his murder and the investigation that follows. We will have hours, maybe a full day, before anyone thinks to look for the servants. By then we will be far away. A bell rang, the signal for dessert service. Chef Antonio would be expecting them to begin bringing out the birthday cake, a massive confection of 7 tiers covered in spun sugar and gold leaf. Salvatore made a decision. I will help with the cake service. One last time, so no one suspects. You go to our rooms now, pack, be ready. I will come as soon as I can slip away. Salvatore, go, quickly. And Filomena, take the book first. It is behind the loose brick in the fireplace. If something happens to me, if I cannot get away, you take that book and run, promise me. She kissed him, a quick, fierce pressure of lips. I promise, but you must come. I will not leave without you. Then I will come. Now go. Filomena slipped out through the servants' stairway. Salvatore took a deep breath, smoothed his jacket, and pushed through the door into the dining room. The cake was being wheeled in on a silver cart, candles blazing, the entire room breaking into an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. Don Vittorio sat at the head of the table, Caterina beside him, both of them smiling as if they had not a care in the world. Salvatore helped position the cake, helped serve the slices onto fine china plates. He poured champagne into crystal flutes, moving among the guests like a shadow, invisible as always. He saw Caterina catch the eye of the young woman, Sophia, who was standing near the sideboard. A tiny nod passed between them. Sophia picked up a particular champagne bottle, pre-opened, Salvatore noticed, which was against protocol, and filled a glass with extra care. She brought it to the Don, setting it before him with a smile. For the guest of honor, she said. You are too kind, my dear, the Don replied, his attention already back on the joke being told by Don Angelo Bonanno. Salvatore felt time slow. The poisoned glass sat inches from the Don's hand. One sip and the plot would be in motion. One sip and everything would change. He could still warn him, could still knock the glass away, could still save the man he had served for 42 years. But then he thought of Caterina's cold voice. They will be dealt with. These old houses, they burn so easily. He thought of Filomena upstairs, packing their small lives into bags, trusting him to come. He thought of 42 years of service, of invisibility, of knowing his place and keeping his silence. The Don reached for the glass. Salvatore turned away, walking through the door into the butler's pantry, through the kitchen, up the servants' stairs. Behind him he heard a toast being called, glasses raised, a room full of wolves celebrating a lamb. He climbed faster, his old knees protesting, his heart hammering. Up 1 flight, 2 flights to the 3rd floor, to the small apartment where Filomena waited. She had packed 2 small suitcases, one for each of them. She wore her coat, her good shoes, her face pale but determined. The book? He asked. She held up a leather-bound journal, worn and stained. Inside were 4 decades of secrets, names, dates, crimes, debts, alliances, betrayals. The hidden history of the Galante family, written in Salvatore's careful hand. Then we go. Now. Quickly. They moved through the mansion's upper hallways, descending via the back stairs that servants used. Down to the 2nd floor, the 1st floor, the basement. The sounds of the party faded above them, muffled by stone and wood. The basement was dim, lit by single bulbs in wire cages, storage rooms full of furniture, linens, old files, and in the deepest corner, behind a wine rack that looked fixed but actually swung out on hidden hinges, a door of iron. Salvatore worked the lock. It was stiff from disuse, but he had oiled it regularly over the years, keeping it functional for a day he hoped would never come. The door opened with a groan of protest. Beyond was darkness, the smell of damp stone and stale air. The tunnel. Filomena hesitated at the threshold. What if it has collapsed? What if we get trapped? Then we die free instead of burning in our beds. Come. He took her hand. They stepped into the darkness, pulling the door closed behind them. Above, in the dining room, Don Vittorio Galante raised his glass of poisoned champagne to his lips and drank deep. The feast continued. The music played. The wolves smiled their smiles and sharpened their teeth, and 2 old servants fled through forgotten darkness, carrying secrets that could destroy empires, running from the only home they had ever known, toward an uncertain future that waited like a held breath. Behind them, the door locked with a final click. Ahead, the tunnel stretched into black, and in their wake, in the mansion they abandoned, a Don began to die. The clock showed 8:17 p.m. when they entered the tunnel. By 8:30, the screaming would begin. The tunnel was narrower than Salvatore remembered. Perhaps it had always been this tight, and he had simply been younger, smaller, less aware of how stone walls could press in from both sides, like the jaws of something hungry. Or perhaps the decades had caused settling, shifts in the earth that squeezed the passage tighter year by year. He led the way with a small flashlight he had grabbed from the basement utility closet, its beam weak and yellow, pushing back the darkness only a few feet at a time. Behind him, Philomena followed, one hand on his shoulder, the other clutching her suitcase. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the confined space, the sound bouncing off damp stone and coming back distorted. The tunnel had been built in 1922, during the height of Prohibition, when the Galante family had run bootlegged whiskey from the Canadian border to speakeasies throughout the city. Don Vittorio's father, Don Giuseppe, had commissioned the passage as an escape route and smuggling corridor, connecting the mansion's wine cellar to a warehouse he owned 3 blocks south. After Prohibition ended, the tunnel had fallen into disuse, its existence gradually forgotten by everyone except the mansion's longtime custodians. Salvatore had explored it once, 40 years ago, when he had first taken the position as the Galante's butler. He had memorized its route, its features, as he memorized everything about the estate. A servant who knew the hidden ways was valuable. A servant who knew them and kept silent was invaluable. Now that knowledge might save their lives. The passage ran straight for perhaps 200 feet before beginning a gradual descent. The walls here were brick, laid by craftsmen long dead, the mortar crumbling in places but still holding. Water seeped through in thin streams, painting dark stains on the red clay. The air was thick and cold, tasting of minerals and decay. How much further? Philomena's voice was small, swallowed by the tunnel's acoustics. Perhaps 20 minutes at this pace. The passage runs beneath the estate wall under Carmine Street and comes up in the old warehouse basement. From there we can reach the main street and find a cab. And if the warehouse is locked, if the exit is blocked, then we find another way. We break through, we do not go back. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds their breathing and footsteps and the drip of water finding its way through stone. Salvatore's mind raced, planning, calculating. They would need to get far from the city, somewhere the Galante family's reach did not extend, perhaps south to Florida, where Philomena had a cousin she had not seen in 30 years, or west to somewhere anonymous like Arizona or Nevada, places where 2 old people could disappear into retirement communities and be forgotten. But first, they needed to survive the next few hours. Above them, separated by earth and stone and the weight of a criminal empire, the feast was continuing. Or perhaps it had already ended. Perhaps Don Vittorio had already collapsed, the poison working its way through his system. Perhaps Caterina was already screaming accusations at Donna Lucia. Perhaps Tommy the Bull Marconi was already tearing through the mansion, looking for answers, looking for someone to hurt. "Salvatore," Philomena said suddenly, "we should have warned him. Whatever happens to us, we should have warned the Don." He stopped, turning to face her in the flashlight's weak glow. Her face was drawn, her eyes haunted. Guilt, he realized. After 42 years of service, she felt the weight of betrayal. "If we had warned him, we would be dead," he said gently. Caterina would have denied everything. The Don would have believed her, he always believes her, and we would have become problems to be solved. You know how problems are solved in that house. But he trusted us. He trusted our loyalty. He trusted our servitude. There is a difference. We were tools to him, Philomena, useful tools, well-maintained tools, but tools nonetheless. You do not consult tools. You do not protect tools. You use them and replace them when they break. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her wrinkled cheeks. I know you are right, but it still feels wrong, like we are betraying everything we built our lives around." Salvatore pulled her close, his arms around her thin shoulders. "We built our lives around survival, around making ourselves small enough to be overlooked, quiet enough to be forgotten. That survival does not require us to die with a sinking ship. The Don made his choices. Caterina made hers. Now we make ours." They stood there for a moment, 2 old people embracing in a forgotten tunnel, mourning the only life they had known. Then Philomena pulled back, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and nodded. "You are right. I am sorry. I am just frightened. So am I, but we keep moving, come." The tunnel began to slope downward more steeply. The bricks gave way to rough stone, the passage becoming more cave-like, less architectural. The temperature dropped. their breath misting in the flashlight beam. Salvatore's knees protested each step, pain shooting through the joints. Filomena breathed heavily, her lungs struggling with the damp air. They were too old for this, too old to be running, too old to be starting over. But age was irrelevant when the alternative was death. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably 15 minutes, they reached a section where the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Here, wooden crates were stacked against the walls. The wood rotted and collapsed, spilling their contents. Salvatore shone his light across broken bottles, the glass thick and greenish. Old whiskey bottles from the 1920s, long empty, their contents consumed or evaporated. "We can rest here for a moment," he said, setting down his suitcase. His legs were trembling with fatigue. Filomena lowered herself onto a relatively dry section of floor, her back against the stone wall. She opened her coat, pulling out a small thermos that Salvatore had not noticed her packing. "Water," she said, unscrewing the cap. "We will need it." They shared the water, passing the thermos between them. It was cold and clean, tasting of the mountain springs that fed the estate's plumbing, perhaps the last water from that source they would ever drink. "What will we do when we get out?" Filomena asked. "We have some money, but not much, and we cannot work. We are too old, and we have no references that we dare use." Salvatore patted the leather journal in his coat pocket. "We have this. 42 years of secrets. Names of politicians on the Galante payroll. Details of murders, extortions, money laundering operations, offshore accounts, safe houses. Identities of protected witnesses who were killed, everything. You would sell it? Become informants? Not sell. Trade. We find a federal prosecutor, someone ambitious who would love to dismantle the Galante organization. We give them information in exchange for protection, witness protection, new identities, relocation, a stipend to live on. The government does this all the time for people who testify against the families." Filomena was quiet for a long moment. "That is a dangerous path. Even in witness protection, the families sometimes find people, and we would be betraying everyone we knew, everyone we served." "They have already betrayed us," Salvatore said harshly. "Caterina planned to burn us alive to cover her tracks. The Don valued us only as long as we were useful. There is no honor in that relationship, no loyalty that demands our silence unto death. We owe them nothing. And Donna Lucia, what of her? She will be blamed for the murder. She will be killed for something she did not do." That thought had been gnawing at Salvatore since they entered the tunnel. Donna Lucia, quiet and dignified, fading away in her East Wing rooms, had been nothing but kind to them over the decades. She had never demanded, never complained, never treated them with anything but gentle respect. "If we go to the authorities, if we expose Caterina's plot, then Donna Lucia will be cleared," he said. "The truth will come out. She will be saved. If the authorities believe us, if they act quickly enough, if Caterina does not kill her first to tie up loose ends." Too many ifs, too many variables in a situation spiraling beyond their control. But what choice did they have? They were two elderly servants fleeing through darkness with a suitcase of secrets and a desperate plan. "We do what we can," Salvatore said finally. "We survive. We tell the truth. We let others decide what justice looks like." A sound echoed through the tunnel, distant, distorted by the acoustics, but unmistakable. Voices, shouts, the sounds of pursuit. They had been discovered. "Move!" Salvatore hissed, grabbing his suitcase and pulling Filomena to her feet. "Now quickly!" They hurried down the tunnel, no longer conserving energy, driven by fear. The flashlight beam bounced crazily off the walls. Salvatore's heart hammered, his breath coming in gasps. Behind them, the voices grew louder, echoing closer. "There! The old passage! Search it!" Tommy Marconi's voice, unmistakable, even distorted by distance. The enforcer must have remembered the tunnel, must have thought to check it when the servants could not be found. Or perhaps someone had seen them descending to the basement. Perhaps their escape had not been as clean as they hoped. The tunnel began to climb, rising toward the warehouse. Salvatore's legs burned, his lungs screaming for air. Filomena stumbled, nearly falling, and he caught her, half dragging her forward. "I cannot," she gasped. "Go without me. Save yourself. Never. We go together or not at all." The passage leveled out, widening. Ahead, Salvatore could see a different quality of darkness. Not the absolute black of the tunnel, but the grey of a space with some ambient light. The warehouse basement. They burst out of the tunnel into a large underground room filled with debris. Old furniture, broken machinery, stacks of moldy newspapers from decades past. A stairway led upward to a metal door. Salvatore could see light around its edges, streetlights from the alley outside. He pulled Filomena toward the stairs, their feet clattering on the concrete. Behind them, flashlight beams cut through the tunnel entrance. Shouts, closer now. "Stop! In the name of the Don!" Salvatore reached the door, grabbed the handle, pulled. It did not move. He tried pushing, still nothing. The door was locked or blocked from the outside. "Break it down," Filomena said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Use something heavy." Salvatore looked around desperately. There, a length of iron pipe fallen from some ancient boiler system. He grabbed it, swung it against the door with all his strength. The impact rang like a bell, pain shooting up his arms. The door held. He swung again. Again. The door began to buckle. One more swing. The door burst open, and Salvatore fell forward into an alley. Filomena was right behind him, dragging their suitcases. They were out, free, breathing the cold October air of the city. Behind them, Tommy Marconi and two other enforcers emerged from the warehouse basement, their faces twisted with rage. "There!" Tommy pointed. "Get them! Do not let them escape!" Salvatore and Filomena ran, or rather, they moved as quickly as their old bodies could manage, which was somewhere between a fast walk and a shuffling jog. The alley opened onto Carmine Street, lit by yellowed street lamps, empty at this hour. To the left, the street led back toward the Galante estate. To the right, it connected to a busier avenue where there might be taxis, witnesses, safety in numbers. They turned right, Salvatore pulling Filomena along. Behind them, the enforcers pounded after them, young and strong, closing the distance with terrifying speed. A car turned onto the street, an old sedan, civilian, no threat. Salvatore waved his arms frantically. "Help! Police! Help us!" The car swerved around them and kept going. No one wanted to get involved in whatever was happening. Not in this neighborhood. Not when men in expensive suits were chasing elderly people through the streets. Ahead, Salvatore could see the glow of the main avenue. 2 blocks away. Might as well have been 2 miles. His vision was graying at the edges, his heart a hammer trying to break through his ribs. Filomena was gasping, her face pale, her lips blue. Footsteps behind them, close enough to hear breathing. "End of the line, old man," Tommy Marconi's voice, cold and certain. Salvatore turned, putting himself between the enforcers and Filomena. He pulled out the leather journal, holding it up like a shield. "You want this," he said, his voice shaking. 42 years of secrets. Names, dates, crimes. Everything the FBI would love to know about the Galante family. You touch us, I drop it. A good citizen finds it. The Don's entire empire comes crashing down. Tommy stopped, the other enforcers flanking him. The big man's face was unreadable in the streetlight shadows. "The Don is dead," he said flatly. "Poisoned at his own feast, which means threats about exposing him are worthless." Salvatore felt the world tilt. Dead already. The poison had worked faster than he expected. "Then you want it even more," Salvatore said, thinking fast, "because whoever takes over will want to know what secrets exist, what leverage their enemies might have. This book is valuable to anyone in power. And right now, power is in flux." Tommy considered this. He was a brutal man, but not a stupid one. "Give me the book. I will let you live. You can disappear, spend your last years in peace somewhere far from here. But the book stays. No deal. The book is our insurance. We give it to the authorities. They protect us. We give it to you. We are dead within the hour. You are dead anyway if you do not cooperate." Tommy's hand went to his jacket, where his gun would be holstered. "Try it," Salvatore said with more courage than he felt. "Kill 2 old servants in the middle of the street. See how that plays with the police investigation into the Don's murder. See how the new boss appreciates you drawing more attention to the family in their moment of crisis." A standoff. 3 younger, stronger men with weapons, facing 2 elderly servants with a book and desperation. The moment stretched, tension pulled taut. Then a car turned onto the street. Not a civilian sedan this time, but a police cruiser, its lights flashing, drawn by the earlier commotion or perhaps by some unrelated call. Tommy Marconi cursed viciously in Italian. He and his enforcers melted back into the shadows of the alley, disappearing like smoke. They could not be caught standing over 2 old people. Not tonight. Not with the Don dead and investigations beginning. The police car pulled up beside Salvatore and Filomena. A young officer rolled down the window, his face bored and suspicious. "Everything all right here?" Salvatore made a choice. A desperate, irreversible choice. "Officer, we need protection." We have information about a murder, about the Galante organization. We want to speak to federal authorities. We want to make a deal." The officer's boredom evaporated, replaced by sharp interest. He spoke into his radio, calling for backup, for detectives, for someone higher up the chain of command. Within minutes, the street filled with police vehicles. Within an hour, Salvatore and Filomena were sitting in a federal building downtown, facing a young FBI agent named Michael Torres, who looked at the leather journal the way a starving man looks at bread. "You understand what you are offering?" Agent Torres asked. "Testimony against the Galante organization in exchange for witness protection?" "We understand," Salvatore said. His hand was still clasped around Filomena's, their fingers intertwined. "We want safety, new identities, money to live on, and we want justice for Donna Lucia Galante, who is innocent of her husband's murder." "Tell me about that," Torres said, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me everything." So Salvatore told him about Caterina Rossi and her plot, about the poison in the champagne, about the plan to frame Donna Lucia, about 42 years of service in a house built on blood and secrets. He told him about the journal, about every name and crime and hidden operation documented in its pages. And as he spoke, as the night deepened outside the federal building's windows, Salvatore felt something he had not felt in decades. Freedom. The mansion they had fled was in chaos. Don Vittorio Galante's body had been removed by coroners. Donna Lucia had been arrested, screaming her innocence, dragged from her East Wing rooms by police who found poison hidden in her bathroom, planted there, just as Caterina had promised. Caterina herself played the grieving mistress to perfection, her tears flowing, her hands shaking, her voice breaking as she told detectives how Donna Lucia had grown increasingly unstable, increasingly jealous, increasingly dangerous. The guests had scattered, each family returning to their territories, already calculating what the Don's death meant for the balance of power. Tommy Marconi coordinated the family's response, trying to maintain order, while the underboss, Carmine Vaccaro, and the consigliere, old Augusto Ricci, argued about succession. No one noticed that 2 elderly servants were missing. Not yet. There were bigger problems demanding attention. But by dawn, when the organization began to take stock, when someone thought to ask where Salvatore and Filomena had gone, it would be too late. They would be in federal custody, protected by marshals, telling their stories to prosecutors who smiled like wolves scenting blood. The empire Don Vittorio Galante had built over 40 years would begin to crumble, brick by brick, secret by secret, betrayal by betrayal. And 2 old people who had lived their entire lives in the shadows would step into the light as the instruments of its destruction. In a safe house across the city, Salvatore and Filomena sat on a couch that smelled of disinfectant and old cigarettes. Federal agents stood guard outside. The leather journal sat on a table being photographed page by page, its secrets becoming evidence. "What happens now?" Filomena asked quietly. Salvatore looked at his wife, this woman who had stood beside him for 42 years, who had fled through darkness with him, who had chosen survival when easier paths beckoned. "Now we disappear," he said. "New names, new lives, somewhere quiet where no one knows us. We become different people. After 42 years of being invisible, we should be good at that." He smiled, a genuine smile that felt strange on his face. Yes, we should be. Outside, the city prepared for dawn. The Galante mansion stood dark and troubled, its master dead, its servants fled, its secrets spilling into the light. And in the East Wing, in a cell where they had placed her pending investigation, Donna Lucia Galante sat with her hands folded, her face calm, waiting for a justice that might never come, unless 2 old servants could deliver it. The wheel had turned, the feast had ended, the blood had been spilled. Now came the reckoning. The safe house was a nondescript apartment, in a nondescript building in a neighborhood where people minded their own business. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room with furniture that had seen better decades. The windows were covered with heavy curtains that were never opened. Federal marshals rotated shifts outside the door, their presence the only thing standing between Salvatore and Filomena and the long reach of the Galante organization. Agent Michael Torres became a regular visitor over the following days, bringing legal documents, conducting interviews, slowly building the case that would bring down one of the most powerful crime families on the eastern seaboard. He was 32, ambitious, sharp-eyed, with the intensity of a man who saw this case as his ticket to bigger things. "The journal is extraordinary," he said on the third day, sitting across from Salvatore at the small kitchen table. Coffee steamed between them, strong and black. "We have been investigating the Galantes for years, but we could never get anyone on the inside to talk. Everyone was too loyal or too afraid. But this—" he tapped the photocopied pages spread before him. "This is a roadmap to their entire operation." Salvatore nodded slowly. 42 years. I saw everything, heard everything. I wrote it all down, thinking perhaps one day it might be needed. I never imagined it would be needed like this. The detail is remarkable. Dates, amounts, names of politicians and judges on the payroll, offshore account numbers, details of murders that were never solved. You must have an excellent memory. A servant's memory must be excellent. We remember which wine the Don prefers, which temperature he likes his coffee, which associates he trusts and which he merely tolerates. Remembering other details is no different. Torres shuffled through the papers. This entry from August 1998. You describe a meeting between Don Galante and Senator Richard Carmichael. You say money changed hands? 50,000 in cash, in exchange for blocking a gaming commission investigation. Yes, I served them dinner, lobster and champagne. The senator was nervous, the Don was calm. The briefcase sat on the floor between them throughout the meal. Carmichael is still in office, still powerful. This testimony could destroy him. Many will be destroyed, Salvatore said quietly. That is the nature of the truth. It does not discriminate. Torres leaned back, studying the old man across from him. You understand that once we move forward with this, there is no going back. You and your wife will testify before a grand jury. If indictments are issued, you will testify at trial. The Galante organization will use every resource to discredit you, intimidate you, or worse. You will be painting targets on your backs that will never fade. We already have targets on our backs, Filomena said from the doorway. She had been listening, her arms crossed, her face set with determination. Caterina Rossi wants us dead to cover her crimes. The new leadership will want us dead for betraying the family. We are dead anyway unless you protect us. We will protect you, Torres assured her. New identities, relocation to somewhere the family cannot reach, stipends to live on. That is the deal. And Donna Lucia? Salvatore asked. She is innocent. She sits in a cell accused of murdering her husband when the real killer walks free. What of her? Torres's expression tightened. That is complicated. The evidence against her appears strong. Poison was found in her rooms. Her motive is clear. And Caterina Rossi's testimony paints her as unstable and threatening. The district attorney believes he has a solid case. The evidence was planted. We told you this. I believe you, but belief is not proof. We need to prove Caterina Rossi orchestrated the murder. We need to connect her to the poison, to the woman who helped her. This Sophia you mentioned. We need physical evidence, witnesses beyond just your testimony. You have my testimony. You have my journal, which documents decades of crimes but does not directly implicate Rossi in the Don's murder. You overheard her planning it, yes. That is significant. But defense attorneys will argue that you misheard, misunderstood, that you are lying to save Donna Lucia because you are loyal to her. They will attack your credibility, your age, your memory. We need more. Frustration burned in Salvatore's chest. Then what do we do? Let an innocent woman be convicted while the guilty one celebrates? Torres spread his hands. We build the case carefully. We find Sophia, whoever she is. We trace the poison. We look for financial transfers that might connect Rossi to a larger conspiracy. We turn other members of the organization, get them to testify. These things take time. Donna Lucia does not have time. The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Then we work quickly. Over the following weeks, the federal building became Salvatore and Filomena's second home. They spent hours in interview rooms, going through the journal page by page, explaining context, providing details. Torres brought in other agents, prosecutors, specialists in organized crime. The case grew like a living thing, fed by secrets and nurtured by ambition. Outside the safe house and federal building, the city continued its life. News of Don Vittorio Galante's death dominated headlines for days before fading into the background noise of urban violence. His funeral was held with full Catholic rites, despite the protests of clergy who knew what he had been. Thousands attended, a who's who of organized crime and corrupt officialdom, all paying respects to a fallen king. Donna Lucia was not permitted to attend her husband's funeral. She remained in custody, her bail denied due to flight risk. her attorney fighting an uphill battle against overwhelming evidence. Caterina Rossi played her part beautifully. She appeared in black veils at the funeral, weeping elegantly, supported by associates who whispered comfort. She gave interviews to select media, speaking of the Don's generosity, his strength, the tragedy of his murder at the hands of a jealous wife. She was the picture of grief. Behind the scenes, she moved with ruthless efficiency. She met with the underboss, Carmine Vaccaro, and the consigliere, Augusto Ricci, positioning herself as an advisor, a confidant, someone who understood the Don's wishes and could help navigate the transition of power. She had allies, people she had cultivated during her 2 years with the Don, and she used them now. The search for Salvatore and Filomena was intense, but ultimately futile. Tommy Marconi coordinated the effort, putting word out on the street, checking airports and bus stations, leaning on contacts. But the servants had vanished as if they had never existed, protected by federal resources that even the Galante organization could not easily penetrate. For they have turned, Tommy reported to the new leadership council, Vaccaro, Ricci, and 3 senior capos meeting in the Don's old office. The FBI has them. They are cooperating. Vaccaro, a thick-necked man of 50 with grey hair and dangerous eyes, slammed his fist on the desk. How much do they know? Everything, Augusto Ricci said quietly. The consigliere was 75, white-haired and thin, his mind still sharp despite his age. They served the Don for over 40 years. They were invisible, which means they saw and heard everything. If they are talking, they can destroy us. Then we need to silence them, one of the capos said. Find where the feds are hiding them. Eliminate them. Easier said than done, Tommy replied. The FBI will have them in protective custody. Multiple guards, secure locations. Even if we found them, getting to them would require resources and violence that would bring down more heat than we can afford right now. Not with the Don just murdered and investigations ongoing. Caterina, sitting to the side in a chair that had once been Donna Lucia's, spoke up. Let them talk. What can they really prove? That they overheard conversations, that they saw things. Without physical evidence, their testimony is just words. And words can be discredited. We paint them as disgruntled servants, angry at being overlooked, looking for revenge and money from the government. She is right, Ricci said thoughtfully. We cannot silence them easily, but we can destroy their credibility. We spread stories, we find dirt from their past. We make them look unreliable. But Salvatore's journal, Vaccaro objected. If he kept records, he is a servant, Caterina interrupted. An old man with perhaps a grudge, perhaps a fantasy life where he imagined himself important by recording gossip. We say he made it up, exaggerated, confused dates and events. We challenge every entry. We drag out the legal process until the prosecution's case collapses under its own weight. The men around the table considered this. It was a strategy, not perfect, but workable. And Donna Lucia? Ricci asked. What of her trial? Caterina's expression did not change, but something cold flickered in her green eyes. She is guilty of murder. I witnessed her instability, her threats against Vittorio. The evidence speaks for itself. Let justice take its course. Justice, Tommy Marconi repeated, his voice flat. He stared at Caterina with an expression that was difficult to read. The big enforcer had served Don Galante with absolute loyalty for 20 years. He had loved the Don in the way a faithful dog loves its master, and now he sat in a room discussing the murder of that master with the woman who had been the Don's lover. If he suspected Caterina's involvement, he gave no sign, or perhaps he simply did not care. In the end, the organization mattered more than any individual, even the Don himself. The meeting concluded with assignments. Vaccaro would handle day-to-day operations. Ricci would manage legal strategy and political relationships. The capos would maintain control of their territories. Caterina would continue to serve as advisor and public face of the grieving family. And Tommy Marconi would continue searching for Salvatore and Filomena, though with less urgency, now that the strategy had shifted to discrediting rather than eliminating them. After the others left, Caterina remained in the office. She stood by the window where Don Vittorio had stood so many times, looking out at the grounds he had controlled. Now they were hers to influence, if not to own outright. A knock at the door. Sophia entered, nervous as always, closing the door behind her. You wanted to see me? Sit, Caterina commanded. Sophia sat in the chair across from the desk, her hands clasped in her lap. She was pale, drawn, clearly not sleeping well. "The servants are talking to the FBI," Katerina said without preamble. "They overheard our conversation the night of the feast. They know about the poison, about the plan." Sophia's face went white. "Then we are finished. They will arrest us. They will try. But without physical evidence connecting us to the poison, their testimony is questionable. Still, we need to be prepared. You need to be prepared." "What do you mean?" Katerina leaned forward, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "If the FBI comes asking questions, you know nothing. You were at the feast as a guest. You never spoke to me privately. You never saw or heard anything suspicious. You are shocked and horrified by the Don's death and the accusations against Donna Lucia. But if they ask specifically, if they pressure me, you remain silent. You invoke your right to counsel. You tell them nothing." Katerina's eyes bored into Sophia's. "Because if you break, if you confirm what the servants claim, then we both go to prison for the rest of our lives, and I promise you, Sophia, if I go down, I will not go down alone. I will take you with me and make sure everyone knows you were the one who actually administered the poison." Sophia's breath caught. "I said I just had to deliver the champagne, and you did. You were the one who touched the glass, who brought it to the Don. Your fingerprints are on it, not mine. If this falls apart, you are the one who will be blamed. So it is in both our interests to make sure it does not fall apart. Do you understand?" Sophia nodded, trembling. She had been in over her head from the beginning, seduced by Katerina's promises of money and position, too naive to understand the stakes until it was too late. "Good. Now leave. And remember, silence. Complete silence." Sophia fled, and Katerina returned to the window. The grounds were dark now, the October night settling over the estate like a shroud. She felt no guilt over the Don's death. He had been old, complacent, an obstacle to progress. She felt no concern for Donna Lucia. The woman had been a ghost long before being arrested, and ghosts did not inspire sympathy. The only thing Katerina felt was satisfaction. The plan had worked. The Don was dead. Suspicion had fallen on the wife. And now Katerina had influence over the new leadership, a position from which she could continue to accumulate power and wealth. The servants were an annoyance, but manageable. The organization's lawyers were excellent. The case would drag on for months, maybe years. Memories would fade. Witnesses would recant. Money would change hands in the right places. She had won, or so she believed. In the federal building, Agent Torres was building his case with the methodical patience of a man who understood that justice, like revenge, was best served cold. He had teams tracking down every name in Salvatore's journal. He had forensic accountants following money trails. He had agents interviewing former associates, looking for weak links in the Galante organization, and he had a lead on Sophia. Sophia Martinelli, Torres told Salvatore during one of their sessions. 29 years old, works as a pharmaceutical sales representative. No criminal record, no obvious connection to the Galantes. "She was at the feast," Salvatore said. "I saw her with Katerina. She delivered the poisoned champagne. But how did Katerina recruit her? What was the connection?" Salvatore closed his eyes, thinking back through 42 years of observations. Katerina had visitors, women sometimes, friends from her past, from before she met the Don. Young women, ambitious, looking for opportunities. I never paid much attention. They were not my concern. Did you keep records of these visitors? Some. Names signed in the guest book when they came for dinners or parties. Salvatore paused. The guest book. It is in the mansion, in the front hall table. If you can get it, you might find Sophia's name, dates of visits, connections. Torres made a note. "We will get a warrant. Search the mansion. The new leadership will not like it, but that is too bad. And the poison, can you trace it?" "We are trying." The type used was a sophisticated compound, not something easily obtained. "We are checking pharmaceutical companies, research labs, anywhere it might have been sourced. If we can connect Sophia Martinelli to the poison through her work, that would be the link we need." Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation expanded. A judge issued warrants to search the Galante mansion. FBI agents descended on the estate, combing through rooms, seizing documents, photographing everything. The guest book was found, and sure enough, Sophia Martinelli's name appeared multiple times over the previous year. Simultaneously, agents visited Sophia's employer, a pharmaceutical company with access to various compounds, including the one used to poison Don Galante. Her work records showed she had access to the labs. Her purchase orders showed discrepancies, small amounts of materials unaccounted for. The net was tightening. Sophia Martinelli was brought in for questioning. She arrived with a lawyer, a nervous young man who seemed overwhelmed by the federal building's gravity. She sat in the interview room, her hands shaking, her eyes darting. "We know you were at the feast," Torres said, his voice gentle but firm. "We have multiple witnesses placing you there. We have the guest book showing you visited Caterina Rossi multiple times in the months before the murder. We have evidence that you had access to the poison that killed Don Galante." "I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right," Sophia's lawyer interjected. "My client will not be answering questions." "That is her right," Torres agreed, "but I want her to understand her situation. Caterina Rossi is positioning herself to survive this. She has resources, lawyers, influence. If this goes to trial, she will throw you under the bus without hesitation. She will say you acted alone, that you were obsessed with the Don, that you killed him out of some twisted infatuation. And the evidence, your access to the poison, your presence at the feast, your fingerprints on the champagne glass, will support that narrative." Sophia's face crumbled. "She promised me. She said if I stayed silent." "Ms. Martinelli," her lawyer warned. "She said I would be protected," Sophia continued, the words spilling out. "She said the organization would take care of me, that I would never have to worry about money again. She said all I had to do was deliver one glass of champagne and keep quiet." "Sophia, stop talking," her lawyer pleaded. But the dam had broken. Sophia told them everything. How Caterina had befriended her at a gallery opening 2 years ago, how the friendship had deepened, how Caterina had learned about Sophia's financial troubles, her dying mother's medical bills, her desperation, how Caterina had offered a solution, $50,000 for one simple task. She described how Caterina had provided the poison, how she had practiced opening the champagne bottle and adding the compound without it being visible, how she had been terrified the night of the feast but had gone through with it because she needed the money and because Caterina had assured her it would look like natural causes, like the old Don's heart simply giving out. Torres recorded everything. The confession was detailed, damning, exactly what he needed to connect Caterina Rossi directly to the murder. "What happens to me?" Sophia asked when she finished, her voice small and broken. "That depends," Torres said. "You are facing accessory to murder charges at minimum, possibly conspiracy charges as well. But if you cooperate fully, if you testify against Rossi, we can talk to the prosecutor about a deal. Reduced charges, reduced sentence. You would still serve time, but not life." Sophia looked at her lawyer, who nodded slowly. "It is the best you can hope for. I will testify," she whispered. "I will tell everything." The next day, federal prosecutors filed new charges. Caterina Rossi was arrested at the Galante mansion, led out in handcuffs as news cameras rolled. Her expression never changed, her composure perfect even as agents read her Miranda rights. Simultaneously, charges against Donna Lucia Galante were dropped. She was released from custody after 3 weeks of imprisonment, emerging into the autumn sunlight pale and thin, but with her dignity intact. The city exploded with the news. The grieving mistress was actually a murderer. The accused wife was innocent. The servants who had fled had been heroes, not traitors. In the safe house, Salvatore and Filomena watched the news coverage with quiet satisfaction. "Justice," Filomena said softly. "The beginning of it," Salvatore agreed. "The trial will take months. Caterina will fight. The organization will try to interfere, but the truth is out now. It cannot be buried again." Agent Torres visited that evening, bringing Chinese food and good news. The grand jury indicted Rossi on first-degree murder charges. Sophia Martinelli is cooperating fully. We have enough evidence to proceed to trial, and with your testimony providing the context and motive, we have a strong case. And Donna Lucia? Free, cleared. The district attorney issued a public apology for the wrongful prosecution. She is back at the mansion, though I doubt she will stay there long. Salvatore nodded. He had served that house for 42 years, had given it his labor and loyalty and best years. Now he would help destroy the organization that house represented. There was poetry in that, bitter and appropriate. "What about us?" Filomena asked. "When do we disappear?" "After the trial," Torres said. "We need you to testify. After that, the marshals will relocate you. New names, new lives, somewhere the organization will never find you. Will we be safe?" Torres met her eyes. "I cannot promise absolute safety. The families have long memories and deep pockets, but the marshals are very good at what they do. Thousands of witnesses have been relocated over the years. Most live out their lives in peace. You will too." After he left, Salvatore and Filomena sat together on the worn couch, the TV playing quietly in the background. They were two old people who had run through darkness and lived to tell the truth, two servants who had become the architects of justice. Outside, the city prepared for winter. The Galante organization regrouped, wounded but not destroyed. Caterina Rossi sat in a cell, planning her defense, still believing she could win. And Donna Lucia Galante stood in her empty mansion, in rooms that echoed with ghosts, wondering what to do with a freedom she had never expected to have again. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but with terrible weight. And somewhere in the machinery of law and testimony and evidence, two old servants waited to deliver the final blow. The trial of Caterina Rossi began on a cold morning in January, 3 months after Don Vittorio Galante's death. The courthouse was a fortress of marble and steel, its columns rising like sentinels against the winter sky. Security was unprecedented, metal detectors, bag searches, armed marshals at every entrance. The Galante organization's reach was long, and everyone knew that witnesses in cases like this had a tendency to disappear or develop sudden amnesia. Salvatore and Filomena arrived in an unmarked vehicle, escorted by federal marshals who formed a protective cordon around them. They wore clothes that were new but modest, a dark suit for him, a conservative dress for her. They looked like what they were, ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, their notebooks ready. Members of the Galante organization sat in clusters, their faces impassive, their eyes calculating. Donna Lucia occupied a seat in the front row, her silver hair pulled back, her black dress simple and elegant. She looked diminished somehow, as if the 3 weeks in jail had aged her a decade. When her eyes met Salvatore's, she gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement. He returned it. No words were needed. She knew what they had risked, what they had sacrificed to clear her name. Caterina Rossi sat at the defense table, flanked by a team of 3 lawyers, led by Marcus Weinstein, a criminal defense attorney whose reputation for getting mobsters acquitted was legendary. She wore a navy suit, pearls at her throat, her hair pulled back severely. Without makeup, without the trappings of seduction, she looked younger and somehow more dangerous. A woman stripped to her essential self, all calculation and cold intelligence. She did not look at Salvatore and Filomena. She did not look at Donna Lucia. She stared straight ahead, her face a mask of composure. The judge entered, the Honorable Patricia Chen, 60 years old, known for running a tight courtroom and tolerating no nonsense. She took her seat, surveyed the packed room, and called the proceedings to order. The State versus Caterina Rossi. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder. Are the parties ready? The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Marshall, stood. Ready, Your Honor. Weinstein rose, smooth and confident. Ready for the defense, Your Honor. Then let us proceed. Ms. Marshall, your opening statement. Jennifer Marshall was 45, sharp-featured, with the bearing of someone who had prosecuted hundreds of cases and lost very few. She approached the jury, 12 men and women selected after weeks of voir dire, each one supposedly free of connections to organized crime or preconceived notions about the case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice clear and strong, this is a case about betrayal, greed, and cold-blooded murder. The defendant, Caterina Rossi, was the mistress of Vittorio Galante, a powerful man who gave her luxury, status, and access to wealth. But it was not enough. She wanted more. She wanted control. She wanted power. And to get it, she decided that Vittorio Galante had to die. She outlined the case methodically. The relationship between Caterina and the Don, the planning of the birthday feast, the recruitment of Sofia Martinelli, the acquisition of the poison, the delivery of the fatal champagne, the framing of Donna Lucia, the plan to eliminate witnesses. We will prove all of this through testimony and physical evidence. You will hear from Sofia Martinelli, who will tell you how the defendant recruited her and directed her actions. You will hear from Salvatore and Filomena Russo, loyal servants who overheard the defendant planning this murder. You will see forensic evidence linking the defendant to the poison, and when you have heard all the evidence, you will have no choice but to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. She sat down, and Weinstein rose for the defense's opening statement. My client, he said, his voice warm and reasonable, is innocent. She is a victim of circumstance, of jealousy, and of a rush to judgment by prosecutors desperate to close a high-profile case. Yes, Caterina Rossi was involved with Vittorio Galante. Yes, she was at the feast where he died, but involvement is not guilt. Presence is not culpability. He paced before the jury, making eye contact with each member. The prosecution's case rests on the testimony of two elderly servants who claim they overheard a conversation. But memories are fallible, especially in people of advanced age. They claim they heard my client planning murder, but what they actually heard, if they heard anything, was likely taken out of context, misunderstood, or simply imagined. We will show that Salvatore and Filomena Russo had reasons to lie, financial incentives from the government, personal loyalty to Donna Lucia, and anger at being overlooked and undervalued by the Galante family. He turned to face Sofia Martinelli, who sat in the front row, pale and trembling. And Sofia Martinelli? A troubled young woman with debts and a dying mother, who may well have poisoned Vittorio Galante on her own initiative, perhaps hoping to curry favor with someone she idolized. The prosecution has offered her a plea deal in exchange for testimony, which means she has every reason to say whatever they want her to say, to shift blame onto my client to save herself. Weinstein returned to the jury box. Caterina Rossi loved Vittorio Galante. She had no motive to kill him. She benefited from his wealth, his protection, his affection. His death left her with nothing. No inheritance, no position, nothing but grief and false accusations. When you hear all the evidence, when you see through the prosecution's desperate attempts to pin this crime on an innocent woman, you will find her not guilty. He sat down, and Judge Chen called the first witness. The prosecution built its case witness by witness, day by day. Forensic experts testified about the poison found in Don Galante's system, a rare compound not available commercially. Pharmaceutical experts testified about Sofia Martinelli's access to that compound through her work. Financial experts traced payments from Caterina to Sofia, $50,000 wired to an offshore account 3 days after the Don's death. Then came Sofia herself. She walked to the witness stand like someone approaching an execution, her steps hesitant, her face drained of color. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked younger than her 29 years and terrified. Under Marshall's questioning, she told her story, how she had met Caterina at a gallery opening, how the friendship had developed, how Caterina had learned about her financial troubles and offered a solution, how the plan had been explained to her in careful detail. She said it would look like a heart attack, Sofia testified, her voice barely above a whisper. She said no one would suspect anything. She said, I just had to deliver the champagne, and she would take care of everything else. And did you believe her? Yes, I was desperate. My mother needed medical care I could not afford. I was drowning in debt. Caterina promised the money would solve everything. I did not think about it being murder. I tried not to think about it at all. I just did what she told me to do. And after Don Galante died, she paid me $50,000, and she told me to say nothing, to forget it ever happened. She said if anyone asked, I was just a guest at the party, nothing more. Weinstein's cross-examination was brutal. He painted Sofia as a liar, a murderer trying to save herself, a woman who would say anything to avoid life in prison. He pointed out inconsistencies in her timeline, gaps in her memory, the convenient nature of her sudden confession. Isn't it true, he asked, that you only implicated Ms. Rossi after being arrested yourself, after being offered a plea deal? Yes, but isn't it true that you are the one who obtained the poison, who prepared it, who delivered it to Don Galante? Yes, but she told me to. So everything you are saying about Ms. Rossi is self-serving, designed to shift blame from yourself to her. No, she planned it. She made me do it. You are a grown woman, Ms. Martinelli. No one forced you to poison another human being. You made that choice yourself, did you not? Sofia broke down in tears, and Judge Chen called a recess. When testimony resumed, Sofia was composed but clearly shaken. The damage had been done. Weinstein had created reasonable doubt about her credibility. The trial continued through January and into February. Expert witnesses, character witnesses, associates of the Don who testified about Caterina's relationship with him, about Donna Lucia's state of mind, about the dynamics of the household. And finally, in the third week of February, Salvatore took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he walked to the witness box. At 73, he moved with the careful dignity of age, his suit pressed, his silver hair combed back, his dark eyes alert. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Jennifer Marshall approached with respect. Mr. Russo, please tell the jury how long you worked for the Galante family. 42 years, Salvatore replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I began as a butler in 1983. I served Don Vittorio Galante until the night of his death. And in those 42 years you must have seen and heard many things. Yes, a servant in such a household sees everything and hears everything. We are like furniture, present but invisible. People speak freely around us because they do not consider that we might be listening. Did you keep records of what you saw and heard? Yes, I maintained a journal, for my own protection initially, but over time it became a comprehensive record of the family's business. Marshall introduced the journal into evidence, its pages now photocopied and bound in thick folders. And on the night of October 30th, the night of Don Galante's birthday feast, what did you observe? Salvatore described the preparations, the guests, the atmosphere of celebration and hidden tension. Then he came to the crucial moment. I was passing the small library when I heard voices. The door was slightly open. I recognized one voice as belonging to Caterina Rossi. And what did you hear? Salvatore recounted the conversation word for word. The plan to poison the Don, the timing, the method, the framing of Donna Lucia, the intention to eliminate witnesses, meaning himself and Filomena. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Every eye was on Salvatore, every ear attuned to his testimony. And after hearing this, Marshall asked, "What did you do?" "I told my wife. We decided we had to flee. If we warned the Don, we would not be believed, and we would become targets. If we stayed silent, we would die in the accident Caterina planned for us. Our only option was to run and to take the truth to the authorities." "So you fled through a hidden tunnel beneath the mansion?" "Yes, an old Prohibition-era passage. We barely escaped before being caught by the Don's enforcers. We went directly to the police and then to the FBI. Marshall nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Russo." No further questions. Weinstein rose for cross-examination, and Salvatore steeled himself. This would be the real test. "Mr. Russo," Weinstein began, his tone conversational, "you are 73 years old?" "Yes." "And your hearing, at your age, would you say it is as sharp as it once was?" "It is adequate." "Adequate, but not perfect. You wear hearing aids, do you not?" "I do. Many people of my age do." "Indeed. And your memory? Would you say your memory is as reliable as when you were younger?" "My memory is excellent. A servant must remember details." "But you are relying on memory of a conversation you allegedly overheard months ago through a partially closed door while you were passing by, is that correct?" "I stopped to listen, I heard clearly." "You stopped to eavesdrop, you mean? You deliberately listened in on a private conversation?" "I heard something suspicious and paused to understand what was being said. That is not eavesdropping, that is vigilance." Weinstein smiled thinly. "Let us talk about this journal of yours. You claim it contains 42 years of observations about the Galante family's criminal activities." "Yes, and yet you never went to the authorities before. You served the family loyally, accepting money from them, living under their roof, benefiting from their wealth. Why did you not report these crimes as they happened?" "Because I would have been killed. Servants who betray the family do not live long. Or perhaps because you were complicit. Perhaps you were part of the organization yourself, and now you are trying to buy your freedom by inventing stories about my client." "That is not true. You are receiving compensation from the government, are you not? Witness protection, relocation costs, a stipend to live on?" "Yes, that is standard for witnesses in organized crime cases." "So, you have a financial incentive to testify against Ms. Rossi." "I have an incentive to tell the truth and stay alive. Those are not the same thing as lying for money." Weinstein changed tactics. "You served Donna Lucia Galante as well as the Don, correct?" "I served the household." "But you brought Donna Lucia her meals, attended to her needs. You must have developed a relationship with her." "I was respectful and dutiful." "And when she was arrested for her husband's murder, you must have been upset. You must have wanted to help her." "I wanted the truth to be known, the truth as you see it, which conveniently exonerates the woman you served and implicates the woman who displaced her in the Don's affections. Tell me, Mr. Russo, do you dislike Caterina Rossi?" "I do not know her well enough to dislike her. I know what I heard, what you claim to have heard, what you want this jury to believe you heard." The cross-examination continued for hours, Weinstein probing for weaknesses, contradictions, anything that might undermine Salvatore's credibility. But Salvatore held firm, his testimony consistent, his demeanor calm. Finally, Weinstein returned to his seat. No further questions. The next day, Filomena took the stand. She corroborated Salvatore's account, describing their decision to flee, the escape through the tunnel, the terror of being pursued. She was a sympathetic witness, a small, elderly woman who spoke quietly but firmly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes never leaving the jury. Weinstein was gentler with her than he had been with Salvatore, perhaps recognizing that attacking an old woman too harshly might backfire. But he still challenged her memory, her motives, her relationship with Donna Lucia. When both servants had finished testifying, the prosecution rested its case. The defense called its own witnesses, character witnesses who spoke of Caterina's generosity, her kindness, her devotion to Don Galante, associates who testified that she had seemed genuinely grieved by his death, medical experts who suggested that the Don's death could have been natural, that the poison levels found in his system might have been introduced post-mortem by incompetent medical examiners. It was a vigorous defense, expertly orchestrated, but it could not erase Sofia Martinelli's confession, or the servant's testimony, or the forensic evidence linking Caterina to the crime. Caterina herself did not testify. Weinstein advised against it, knowing that Marshall would destroy her on cross-examination. Closing arguments came in late February. Marshall summarized the evidence systematically, building a narrative of premeditation, conspiracy, and murder. Weinstein countered with reasonable doubt, attacking the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, suggesting alternative explanations for every piece of evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 days. The city held its breath. News crews camped outside the courthouse. The Galante organization waited, ready to respond however the verdict fell. On the afternoon of February 24th, the jury announced they had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. Salvatore and Filomena sat in their usual seats, flanked by marshals. Donna Lucia was present, her face unreadable. Members of the Galante organization clustered together, their expressions carefully neutral. Caterina stood as the jury filed in. Her face was pale but composed, her hands steady on the defense table. Judge Chen addressed the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes, looked directly at Caterina. "We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a few shouts quickly silenced by Judge Chen's gavel. Caterina's composure finally cracked, her face crumpling, her knees buckling slightly before her lawyers caught her arms. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find?" "Guilty." Judge Chen thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. Caterina was remanded into custody immediately, led away by marshals as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Salvatore felt Filomena's hand slip into his. They had done it. They had told the truth, and the truth had been believed. Donna Lucia approached them as the courtroom cleared. Up close, she looked older than her 58 years, the ordeal having carved new lines into her face. But her eyes were clear, her voice steady. "Thank you," she said simply. "You risked everything to clear my name. I will never forget that." "You were innocent," Salvatore replied. "That is all that mattered." She smiled sadly. "In this world, innocence rarely matters, but you made it matter. You made the truth matter." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you, not payment. You cannot be paid for what you did, but a gesture to help you start your new lives." Salvatore started to refuse, but Filomena accepted the envelope with a gracious nod. "Thank you, Donna Lucia. What will you do now?" "Leave. Sell the mansion. Move far from this city and these memories. Perhaps I will find peace. Perhaps not. But at least I will be free." She looked at them both. "As will you. Be safe. Be happy. Forget this world ever existed." She walked away, dignified in her grief and her freedom. 3 weeks later, Caterina Rossi was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. She stood before Judge Chen, her face a mask as the sentence was read. She was led away to begin her sentence at a maximum security women's prison upstate. Sofia Martinelli, having cooperated fully, received a reduced sentence of 15 years, with possibility of parole after 10. She wept as she was led away, broken by the weight of what she had done and what she had lost. The Galante organization survived, wounded but intact. Carmine Vaccaro assumed leadership, with Augusto Ricci as his consigliere. They restructured operations, tightened security, learned from the disaster. The machine continued, grinding forward as it always had. But they never forgot the servants who had brought down one of their own. The search for Salvatore and Filomena continued, quietly, patiently, a debt waiting to be paid. which was why 1 week after the sentencing, on a grey morning in early March, Salvatore and Filomena Russo disappeared. Federal marshals transported them from the safe house in the pre-dawn hours. They were driven to an airport, flown to a city they were not told the name of, driven again to a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Everything had been arranged in advance: furniture, utilities, bank accounts under new names. They were no longer Salvatore and Filomena Russo. They were Samuel and Florence Randolph, a retired couple from New Jersey, newly relocated to enjoy their golden years. The house was modest but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a small garden, neighbors who smiled and waved but did not pry. The marshal who handled their transition, a serious woman named Agent Carter, gave them new social security numbers, new driver's licenses, new birth certificates. "You do not contact anyone from your past," she instructed firmly. "You do not visit your old city. You do not tell anyone your real names or history. As far as the world is concerned, Salvatore and Filomena Russo no longer exist. You are Samuel and Florence Randolph. Do you understand?" They understood. They had traded one invisibility for another, one kind of servitude for a different kind of freedom. The first few months were strange, learning to respond to new names, building new routines, shopping at supermarkets where no one knew them, attending a church where they had no history, making small talk with neighbors about weather and television shows. But gradually, the strangeness faded. They became Samuel and Florence in more than just name. They planted tomatoes in the garden. They took walks in the evening. They watched the news and saw occasional updates about the Galante organization, about Caterina Rossi's failed appeals, about Donna Lucia Galante selling the mansion and disappearing to Europe. They felt no guilt about what they had done. The Don had been a criminal who built his empire on violence. Caterina had been a murderer who killed for power and greed. Justice had been served. On their first anniversary in the new city, Salvatore sat in the garden with a glass of wine, not from the Galante cellar, but from a local vineyard, modest and honest. Filomena sat beside him, her hand in his, her face tilted toward the setting sun. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The mansion, the work, the life we had?" Salvatore considered the question carefully. "I miss the familiarity, the knowing my place, my role, but I do not miss the fear. I do not miss making myself small. Here I can be myself. Even if myself is a lie, it is my lie. That is worth something." "We are old," Filomena said quietly. "We do not have many years left. Then we should make the ones we have count. We should be happy as we can be." She leaned against him, and they sat in the garden as the sun set and the stars emerged. 2 old people who had run through darkness and survived to see the light. The years passed. They aged, as all people age. Health declined, memory faded. The world moved on. But they were together, and they were safe, and they had done what they believed was right. When Samuel Randolph died at the age of 82, he did so peacefully in his sleep, with Florence holding his hand. When Florence followed him 18 months later, she went the same way, quietly, with dignity, her secrets intact. They were buried in a small cemetery under headstones that bore their false names and fabricated dates. No one from their old life attended. No one from their new life knew who they really were. But in a courthouse file box somewhere in the city they had fled, in transcripts of a trial that had made national news, in the testimony that had brought down a murderer and freed an innocent woman, their real names lived on: Salvatore and Filomena Russo, servants who became witnesses, invisible people who changed history. In the end, they had served truth with the same dedication they had once served a criminal empire, and in the end, that service had set them free. The end. Caterina Rossi served 15 years of her life sentence before dying of cancer in prison at the age of 43. She never confessed, never showed remorse, and died alone. Sofia Martinelli was released after 12 years. She disappeared into obscurity, her name changed, her past buried, living with the weight of what she had done. Donna Lucia Galante moved to a villa in Tuscany, where she lived quietly for another 20 years before passing peacefully at the age of 78. She never remarried. She never returned to America. The Galante organization continued for another decade before being dismantled through a series of federal prosecutions that used evidence from Salvatore's journal. Dozens were convicted. The empire crumbled. Tommy the Bull Marconi was killed in a territory dispute in 2028. Carmine Vaccaro died of a heart attack in 2030. Augusto Ricci, the last of the old guard, died in prison in 2032 at the age of 87. The mansion was demolished in 2027, replaced by luxury condominiums. The wine cellar was filled in. The hidden tunnels were sealed. The past was erased, or so they thought. But the past is never truly erased. It lives in memories, in testimony, in the choices people make when faced with impossible situations. Two elderly servants fled through darkness carrying truth, and truth, in the end, proved more powerful than all the violence and wealth and influence of the Galante Empire. Justice came slow, but it came, and that perhaps is all anyone can ask.